Once upon a time, in the noisy modern world, from waking up to going to bed, the citizens devoured self-help content, chasing the promise of a better, happier life. But what if I told you that this never-ending chase hides a deeper illusion called the self-help syndrome? I'm not here to bash the self-help industry because I've myself gone through a huge phase of self-development, and I'm able to criticize self-development because I myself have deeply been immersed in it. And it's through this journey that I realized that the promise of self-help is much more complex than we think. Self-development not only created toxic positivity and reinforced our hustle culture, but it created an illusion that is hard to escape, because self-development itself was born within this very illusion. An illusion that not only self-help consumers are trapped in, but also many self-help gurus within the industry itself. I guess we all know a friend that went through a heartbreak and dived into self-development. I myself have been guilty of this. Heartbreak is often a catalyst for self-reflection and change, so it makes sense that people that go through a heartbreak often turn to self-help, seeking for answers and reassurance that they can be happy again. But is it really just that? I realize that most of us lack self-worth, and that our heartbreaks triggers this sleeping fear within us that maybe we're not enough. And so I started to wonder, what if the promise of self-help was not a promise to be happier and freer, but was something else? The promise of being more valuable. The Stanford Marshmallow Experiment by Walter Mischel in the 1970s tested children's ability to delay gratification. The children who could wait for the second marshmallow were found to have better life outcomes. And this experiment has been used a lot to justify self-discipline as a key for success. But it also highlights how social pressures and the promise of future rewards can drive our behavior. Have you ever noticed the two main types that are in self-development? On one side, we have the binge watchers, drowning in motivational videos, but struggling to take action. On the other side, we have the hustlers, so busy chasing after their goals, they barely have time to breathe. They might seem different to you, but they are more alike than they would like to admit. They are both trapped in the same illusion. Our first type, the binge watchers, just like the hustlers, start this journey because they feel like they need to be better. But the binge watchers end up consuming content seeking for validation and temporary relief. By watching content, they feel like they're at least doing something, but they soon feel even less worthy because it seems that they are unable to achieve this ideal lifestyle. Jean Baudrillard's concept of hyper-reality explains pretty well what is going on in the binge watcher's mind. This concept suggests that in modern society, symbols and representations become more relevant than the reality itself. The self-development industry creates a hyper-reality where the ideal self becomes a representation of something that doesn't exist. Think about the perfectly curated images or success stories you can see on social media or in self-help books. These representations can create unrealistic expectations and the pressure to conform to an ideal that is unattainable or even real. It's this same hyper-reality that traps people into a cycle of constant striving and dissatisfaction. The hustler on the surface seems worlds apart from the binge watcher. They are the go-getters, achievers, constantly striving for success. However, their never-ending chase for success is driven by the same desire for validation. Hustlers measure their worth through accomplishments, isolating themselves and diving into a cycle of never-ending self-improvement. But unlike the binge watchers, the hustlers are not only toxic for themselves, but also for those around them. Their obsession with goals, fitness, and success can create a facade of happiness and freedom. This facade not only makes the binge watchers question their own worth, but makes the hustlers dive deeper into the self-help syndrome, ironically encouraged by the binge watchers. And this is how the hustler ends up falling into the worst form of manipulation: self-manipulation. This concept of self-manipulation is brilliantly explored by Jules and Beauvoir in their book Le Petit Traité de la Manipulation. Although the book primarily delves into manipulation tactics that we can fall victim to, it also offers valuable insights into how we can manipulate ourselves. One of the key ideas they discuss is the trap of decisions, which involves concepts like the escalation of commitment, sunk cost, and the absurd trap. They used as an example students who realize in their first semester that their chosen university course doesn't meet their expectations or career goals, and that common sense would suggest that they should drop out and switch paths. But actually many persist driven by the need to justify their initial decision. This persistence often leads many people to waste years before changing careers. And that's what Jules and Beauvoir call the absurd trap. They highlight by how sticking to a decision driven by the desire to maintain a positive self-image, we often become prisoners of our own decisions, unable to break free even if it's necessary and for our best interest. This adherence to our choices despite the negative incomes is a classic example of self-manipulation. This reveals how the hustlers, despite their achievements, might be caught up in a cycle of self-validation that is as limiting as the binge watcher's quest for escapism. Both of them are caught in hyper-reality, pretending that their respective pursuits bring them happiness and freedom, while in reality, they are both manipulating themselves to maintain a facade. So yes, the binge watcher and the hustler might seem different at first glance, but they are both running towards the same goal, feeling worthy, even if it means selling their own soul. And I think Maslow will be able to help us understand all of this better. According to Maslow, we have the following needs, physiological needs: safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. The self-development industry often promises individuals to reach self-actualization, but at what cost? The self-development industry capitalizes on people feeling unworthy, but the self-development industry is itself rooted in social and philosophical issues. Our human need for belonging and self-esteem, enhanced by the pressure of modern life, actually highlights something deeper: the alienation. In the economic and philosophic manuscripts, Karl Marx argues that in a capitalist society, workers become alienated from their true selves. This alienation creates a void, a sense of something missing, that the self-help industry promises to fill with solutions to become more productive and successful. Marx identified 4 types of alienation that workers experience in a capitalist society: alienation from the product of labor, alienation from the process of labor, alienation from their humanity, and alienation from others. I'm going to try to explain quickly the last 2, which I find are more relevant to our case. What he meant by the alienation of our own humanity is that in a capitalist society, work becomes a means to an end, rather than a fulfilling activity. This reduction of work to mere economic necessities diminishes the worker's sense of self and humanity, which is deeply linked with the alienation of others, as capitalism promotes competition over cooperation. This competitive environment alienates workers from others, creating isolation and hindering community and solidarity. And hustle culture often reduces work as a means to an end, achieving success and status. Hustle culture promotes competition and self-centeredness. People may begin to see their worth only through achievements and productivity, losing touch with their true selves and humanity, which eventually leads them to a persistent feeling of emptiness. The self-development industry sells itself as a response to this feeling of emptiness. It promises to provide solutions to this alienation. However, Marx would likely argue that these solutions are superficial because they don't address the root cause of the issue. They only provide temporary reliefs or coping mechanism. For the binge watcher, self-help content serves as a temporary escape. It allows them to distract themselves from this feeling of emptiness and alienation. But this escape doesn't solve the underlying issue. For the hustler, the pursuit of success and validation through their achievements is another way to cope. But this drive can lead to burnout and further alienation, because self-help alone will never be able to fill this void. The self-development industry, while promising solutions, often addresses the symptoms rather than the cause of these feelings. I'm not saying that you should completely give up on improving yourself. I myself still strive to be a better person, but it's important to recognize when self-development is becoming about the goal rather than the growth. But mostly it's important to listen to ourselves instead of just listening to the advice of self-help coaches. Because the main issue with self-development is that it delivers to you the answers to your problems. Aristotle would argue that true self-development requires balance between external success and internal growth. This means aligning with a life that is not only successful, but is also rich in moral and intellect virtue. I can't deny that the self-development industry hasn't helped a lot of people, but I think that the main problem is that it doesn't value knowledge and critical thinking. So many people follow blindly self-help coaches, leading them towards a path that maybe was never theirs to follow. As Paulo Coelho once said, maybe the journey isn't about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so that you can be who you were meant to be in the first place. I believe that self-development makes us start a race before we're even able to ask ourselves a question that every human being needs to answer. Who am I? Self-help can be a very useful tool for self-reflection and motivation, but in the end, isn't self-development being the best version of you? So to be the best version of you, shouldn't you start by knowing who you are? Because who you are, well, that's something that self-help coaches will never be able to teach you.